All right, moving on to wide receivers. Talk about our top 10. Who's your number one wide receiver, and where do you have going in the draft, Jeffe?
So my number one wide receiver this year is going to have to be Calvin Ridley. Somebody that, because of the obvious loss of Julio Jones at the Falcons, they bring Kyle Pitts in, but he's a tight end. And even though they might use him in the slot, he's an athletic tight end. He's going to take some targets away. But Calvin Ridley, even with Julio Jones in town, was a guy who got a lot of touchdowns. And now that he's going to see even more targets, as long as he's healthy, I think he's going to be the best wide receiver in fantasy this year. And I don't think it's going to be particularly close. I think his value is.
Those are some bold statements you're making.
I know it, and I he has a good enough quarterback to get him the ball, and that's important when you're talking about the top flight wide receivers. And I think he's going to be a guy who gets maybe 150, maybe more targets this year. Which hopefully you would hope 150 targets results in about 120 or more catches. I think Calvin Ridley's going to have a huge year. The only wide receiver I think that should be a first-round pick, which is also a bold statement, but I do think running back should go in the first round. So Calvin Ridley, I have him. I think the number 7 spot in the first round is about where he should go. I have big hopes for Calvin Ridley this season.
I mean, I have big hopes for him too, man, but I don't think he's number one. That's a bold statement, like I said.
By all means, I'm not talking about Calvin Ridley's the best receiver in the NFL. I just think,
just fantasy-wise.
From a fantasy standpoint, I think he's going to be the best this year.
Yeah, and you may be right. His role last year, he stepped up and really became the Falcons' number one receiver. And with the departure of Julio Jones, that spot's completely solidified for him. Plus, like you said, Matt Ryan is one of the best passers in the game. So I have Ridley as my 5th best receiver on the board. I'm looking at drafting him into probably the mid to late second, just because I think there is a lot more value up there in the first and early second, including the 4 guys I have ahead of him, which we'll get to. But I do think Ridley's going to have a monstrous year. He had a pretty good year last year. I unfortunately didn't have him. I did have him 2 seasons ago because I knew how good he's going to be. I just wasn't able to get my hands on him last season, and he exploded, of course. So I think he's definitely going to replicate that. So he may very well come out as a top receivers, but time will tell.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, so your number 2 is DK Metcalf.
I think this is the year, man.
Bro,
this is the year. We saw
really?
We saw a little bit last year what DK could bring to the table. And look, that Seahawks defense is still going to be garbage. So Russ is going to have to cook a lot more this season. And because of that, DK and Tyler Lockett are both going to be good fantasy assets. But DK's a freak of nature. And I might just be biased about these freak of nature guys. I like my freaks of nature, but he is just he's got everything: the size, the speed. He's shown that he's got the route running ability. He's shown that he can go up and make a tough catch. Like DK is everything I would ever want a receiver to be, and I think he's gonna have to. Again, I think the Seahawks are gonna have to pass a lot. So I think DK has a huge year.
I don't know, man. I'm very, very, very wary of Metcalf this season. He is a freak of nature. Don't get me wrong, and he's electric. He's amazing to watch. The things he does, chasing down who was it, Buda Baker last season?
Yeah,
absolutely crazy. He is trending in the early to mid second round, but I believe his value is going to be that of a late second round at best. The Seahawks have one of the toughest. Actually, they have the toughest stretch against passing defenses through the first 14 games. And actually, they have one of the toughest stretches against running defense, too, in the league. So Russ is really going to have to cook if he wants to get these guys going this season. Metcalf is talented. Russell Wilson's talented. But this may be a very tough year for the Hawks. So to me, I wouldn't be reaching for Metcalf. But if he's there in the late second, it'd be very difficult to pass him up just because he is so talented.
Yeah, that freakish ability that he has is always going to keep him right around. I think somewhere in the second round, late or early third at the latest.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so number three receiver on your board.
Number three, and it was hard to put him at three. But again, I have high hopes for Calvin Ridley and DK Metcalf. But I have Tyreke Hill coming off the board here. Again, somebody that I think should be valued early second round. Again, because running back should be in the first, and he's just always going to get his. He's so fast; he can run away from anybody. He can cut on a dime and lose anybody on a route. So, and obviously Patrick Mahomes is his quarterback, right? So Tyreke Hill, he's going to get his numbers. He's going to get his touchdowns because he just runs away from the whole defense and scurries right in between a bunch of guys like he did against the Cowboys at halftime a couple years ago. He just finds a way. So Tyreke Hill, again, my number three receiver.
Yeah, I also have him as my number three receiver. He is one of the most electric, fastest, and productive receivers in the league. His only downside, which is I don't know how this is a downside, but his only downside is how loaded the Kansas City Chiefs offense is. But he still gets his, and he could break out for a long range bomb at any given play. And he has Patrick Mahomes as the quarterback throwing on the ball. So as with Stefan Diggs, who we're going to talk about here in a little bit, if Tyreke Hill is there in the later part of the first round, I think you have to snag him. I think his upside and his production is going to be that a little bit higher than the second tier running back guys that we talked about earlier. So to me, I have him in the later part of the first round. I definitely think if you pick him or not, you're going to get production from him. He's trending in the first round about pick 8 or so. That's about where I have him. So yeah, I have him up in the first. You said what, early second round?
Early second, yep.
Okay. Yeah, you can't go wrong there. Number 4 receiver on your board is Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, JJ coming in, man. He was so good last year, and even with Kirk Cousins as his quarterback, as a rookie, he came in and had a huge year, and I think he's just going to take that next step. This is what the greats do. They come in, they do well, they take that next step, and I think there's not going to be a sophomore slump here. I think Justin Jefferson is prime and ready to be an absolute star in this league. The young receivers coming in, JJ's on the top of that list. He's the best of them. And I think he's going to be a top 5 receiver, cement himself as a top 5 receiver in the NFL this year. Should have a really big year. I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to take JJ in the first round, but I have him as early second round.
Yeah, he showed us last year just how good he is during his rookie season. My only concern with him is his quarterback, Kirk Cousins. You never know how Cousins is going to play. But Justin shined bright last season, and he'll continue to develop and improve. I'm going to take him mid to late second round if he's there. He's trending about mid to late second round, so about right in line where we're at. I also have him as my number 6 overall wide receiver on the board.
Okay, yeah, that's not bad. I think, when we talk about, the top 10 receivers, a lot of them, I think, are going to end up with damn near the same points. There's a lot of good receivers nowadays in the NFL, so a lot of these guys are very interchangeable where you're drafting them.
Yeah, absolutely. I can agree with that. What number are we on? Number 5. Who's your 5th best receiver?
So before I say his name, I want to go on record saying the last 3 years I've been telling people this is the best wide receiver in the NFL. So I know I'm going to catch shit for this, but there are reasons that I have Devonta Adams as the 5th receiver coming off the board.
Oh yeah, you're about to catch it. Trust me.
Again, in my eyes, the best receiver in the NFL. He does everything so well. And he has Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback, reigning MVP. But this year, we've seen Allen Lazard get a pickup in targets. We've seen Marquez Valdez-Scantling take away some targets, and Devonte Adams still does his thing. But this year they have Devin Funches, who was supposed to be here last year but opted out because of COVID. He's coming this year, and he's going to be the 4th receiver in that rotation. And those are the 3 guys behind Devontae are more than capable of getting catches. So I just think there's just enough happening on this offense that's going to take some of that value away from Devontae. Not a lot. Again, a lot of these top 10 guys are very interchangeable. Stats should be very close, but Devonta Adams is going to have just enough taken away from him to hurt his value.
I don't see it. I don't see it. Devontae was the top fantasy receiver and by far in 2020. And although the Packers are going to have a pretty tough schedule when it comes to going against passing defenses, Adams is still wide receiver number one and has the reigning NFL MVP Aaron Rodgers throwing him the ball. This is the last dance. This is Jordan and Pippen. They are going to make plays. Rodgers, even though he has tons of receivers out there, he is going to make sure he gets his guy the ball because they are that good when that happens. So no shame, in my opinion, in taking Adams mid to late first round once all the top running backs are off the board. He is my number one receiver, and I cannot believe you have him at number 5, Jeffe.
I know I've drafted Devonte Adams very early the last couple of years, so I would do it again. I would happily do it again. He's somebody that I see as a early second round to mid second round kind of guy, but he's just, I mean, again, it was hard to put him here. I felt shamed when I got to number 5, and I was like, I don't have Devonte on here yet, but this is him. I think there's enough there that's going to hurt his value that I had to put him a little lower.
All right, fair enough. Only time will tell.
Yeah.
All right, number 6 on your board.
Now, number 6 is an absolute stud in the NFL. This guy is constantly underrated and not talked about nearly enough. A lot of people come out and say he's the best route runner in the NFL, and there's a very good argument there. We're talking about Keenan Allen for the Chargers, and he has a gunslinger as quarterback. Justin Herbert showed very special abilities in his rookie season. That's a great sign for Keenan Allen, who can routinely just get open whenever he wants because, again, his route running ability is second to none in the NFL. So between his target share, who he has thrown him the ball, and his abilities, Keenan Allen should absolutely be a second-round pick.
Yeah, so I have Allen as my 9th best receiver, which I wish I could put him higher, but that's just the way things came out. Check this stat out. The last 4 seasons, Keenan Allen has averaged more than 100 receptions, even while missing 2 games last season. That's 100 receptions a year, and he only played in 14 of 16 games last season. So he is definitely going to get his points. Plus, you have Justin Herbert, who now has a year under his belt and improved chemistry with Allen. Look for both of them, for that matter, to have a really solid season. The only downside to Keenan Allen is a fairly tough schedule against passing defenses. They have the 6th toughest overall schedule against those through the first 14 games. I have Keenan Allen coming off the board probably late second, early third. But I definitely think there's a high ceiling there for him. He's one of my favorite receivers to watch. And I was watching, I think it was the Pat McAfee show last week, and they had Joe Hayden on from the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they were talking about like who is one of the toughest guys in the league to defend against. Keenan Allen, I think, was his number 1 guy because he's that good.
Joe Hayden has been one of the better corners in the league for I think it's 12 years now, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he's been a while. He's been around a while.
Yeah, he's had to play against a lot of great receivers, and to have Keenan Allen at the top of that list is saying something.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so moving on. Number 7 for you is Stefan Diggs.
Stefan Diggs, yes. And the only reason I have him any lower than a top 5 is because of the addition of Emmanuel Sanders. They obviously they kept Cole Beasley. And I think, that again, kind of like Devonta Adams, there's all the skill set you could ask for in a receiver. The target share is going to be there, but there's going to be just enough taken away that's going to drop him under the guys that I have in front of him. So while Stefan Diggs is easily one of my favorite receivers in the league, he's one of the best at his position in the NFL. But again, Emmanuel Sanders coming in, I think is going to take a good chunk of targets away.
Yeah, and it very well might happen like that. Emmanuel Sanders definitely an upgrade over John Brown. I did like John Brown. He actually balled out for me the first couple of weeks last season before he got hurt. But Sanders is definitely an upgrade there, and he will take away some of that target share. Uh, but Stefan Diggs is Stefan Diggs, man. He tied Tyreke Hill last year as the number two best fantasy receiver in the league, and Josh Allen is poised to have another monster year. And Diggs is his clear cut go to guy. Plus, Buffalo has the 10th easiest schedule up against pass defenses through the first 14 games. So I'm going to count on Diggs to have another huge year for this high octane Bills offense. And that's going to translate well for fantasy owners. If he's there later in the first, I think he'll be very, very, very tough to pass up. He's trending about pick 11. I have him as a second best receiver on the board. So once the top running backs are gone and Devonte Adams is gone, if Stefan Diggs is there, I'm taking him all day long, man. They're going to be putting up numbers this season.
Yeah, and if I see somebody take Stefan Diggs in the late first or the early second round, I wouldn't be surprised at all because he's a special player. He really is. He, no matter who his quarterback is, no matter what his situation is, he goes out there and he works every week and he gets his every week. So Stefan Diggs, again, one of my favorite receivers, but I think the addition of an Emmanuel Sanders is going to hurt him just a little.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out. All right, your number 8 receiver on the board.
This is a guy just like Devonte Adams. I couldn't believe I put him this low, but it's really just the things that his team have done this offseason that made me do it. DeAndre Hopkins is somebody who consistently in the debate for the top best receiver in the NFL, right there with Devonte Adams. But I had to drop him because they have Christian Kirk. They brought in AJ Green. There are weapons around him, and Kyler Murray. I mean, I won't sit here and hate on Kyler Murray. I've done that enough in the past, but we've seen inconsistent accuracy from Kyler Murray, and it happened a lot late last season. The last half of last season, there were some inconsistencies in the passing game from Kyler Murray, and then when you have to worry about inconsistent quarterback play, and then the quarterback on 5 to 8 dropbacks in a game decides to take off and run. So the receivers aren't getting their targets or their yards. And so there were a couple factors that came into me dropping DeAndre Hopkins here. But again, still a top 3 receiver absolutely in the league, but I had to drop him a little bit on my rankings.
Yeah, I have him as my number 4 wide receiver on the board. He has been one of the most consistent receivers the last few years and is currently trending in the second round. But to me, he has the value and the production of a late first rounder. So there's no shame in taking him in the first. But because everybody's kind of passing on him, if he's there in the second, snag him up. It's a huge W in my book. He should be your guy hands down. Like I said, he's trending round 2, pick 15. So if he slides, pick him up. He has the value of a first rounder. That's a win for you. DeAndre Hopkins, number 4. All right, what number are we on? Number 9?
Number 9, yep.
Number 9. Who's your number 9 guy?
Number 9 is the model of consistency no matter who the quarterback is. We're talking about Allen Robinson with the Bears. All right. This dude had Blake Bortles and was a star. This dude's been locked in Chicago with Mitchell Trubisky and Mike Glennon and Nick Foles as his quarterbacks, right? Like subpar quarterback play at all the places he's been, and he just continues to be one of the best receivers in the league. And when you're one of the best receivers in the league, you're going to have decent fantasy value, especially when we're talking about PPR leagues. He gets, it seems like 100 catches every single year, close to or over 1,000 yards every single year. Allen Robinson is going to find a way to get his, no matter who the quarterback is. So I had to have him in my top 10.
Yeah, I have him as my number 10 wide receiver. He finished the year last year as the 8th best receiver with extremely poor quarterback play in 2020. This season, the Bears have upgraded to Andy Dalton, if you want to say upgraded there, or Justin Fields, who I think ultimately is going to take over the play calling. although their strength of schedule versus passing defense is pretty tough this year. They have the ninth toughest overall projected schedule there. Look for Robinson to have a very solid year, especially if Justin Fields is under center as their starting quarterback. I'm looking at taking him in the third round, probably mid third round. But he could be there in the fourth too if you're patient. So we'll see how that fares. Your number 10 wide receiver, who do you have there?
So number 10 was difficult. I think there's got to be somebody else that I could have fit into here. But look, man, Julio Jones is Julio Jones. Like he's a freaking nature.
Julio Jones.
he's that guy. He's just so good. And even with AJ, he's on a team with AJ Brown, who's going to eat up a lot of targets. He's a freaking nature in his own right. He's kind of like a slightly smaller Julio Jones almost. And obviously Derrick Henry it's a run heavy team, but Julio Jones is Julio Jones. As long as he's on the field, in my eyes, he's a top 3 wide receiver in the league. Still, he's been at it for what, a dozen years at this point, and he's still going strong. So Julio, I had to put him there. Again, AJ Brown could have easily slipped in at number 10 for me, but I had to put Julio there.
Yeah, I got Julio Jones at number 13, primarily because of his injury history. He is Julio Jones. He is more than capable of making a play at any given moment. I actually have A.J. Brown higher than Jones at number 7. With the arrival of Jones to the team, it should alleviate some of the coverage against Brown and present quality opportunities for him. And they have a pretty easy schedule when it comes to going up against passing defenses. I think they have the 10th easiest projected in the league. And I definitely think there's great value there for A.J. Brown if you can get him towards the end of the second. But you could interchange him with Julio Jones because Julio Jones is the man. I absolutely love him. I've tried to pick him up every year for the last, I don't even know how long because he's that good. So you could interchange either one of those guys. Both of them are going to have a good season. I can tell you that right now, especially with Derrick Henry running the ball. Like, how are you going to stop that? You stop Henry, you got those two guys on the outside.
Yeah, it's wild the kind of team that they've been able to build. I mean, they're between the offensive line, just a bunch of maulers up front, and then even at your skill position guys are generally, you have some really kind of skinny or athletic guys and guys that are quick, but instead you have 3 freaks of nature who are all quick but can absolutely run anybody over. So I don't know how they've done it there.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. Hopefully the Colts don't have any issues, but we'll see.
Yeah, those are going to be some tough matchups.
All right, to recap, I'm going to read off my list and I'll let Jeffe read off his. My number 1 wide receiver is Devonte Adams, followed by Stefan Diggs, Tyreke Hill, DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, Keenan Allen, Allen Robinson. And then going after my top 10, I have Terry McLaurin, Robert Woods, who should have a huge year, him and Cooper Kupp, with the arrival of Matt Stafford out there in Los Angeles, Julio Jones, Mike Evans, Adam Thielen.
Yeah, that's a pretty good list. And I'm pretty sure our top 10 is pretty much, the same names, just a lot of different positions.
Interchange.
Yeah, I have Calvin Ridley as my number 1. Again, don't even think it's going to be close. I think he's going to have a wild year. But he's followed by DK Metcalf, my second receiver off the board, followed by Tyreke Hill. Justin Jefferson is the number 4, Devonta Adams. My number 5, 6 is Keenan Allen. Stefan Diggs coming in at 7. DeAndre Hopkins is the 8th wide receiver off the board. And then Allen Robinson and Julio Jones finish out my top 10.
I like it.